Welcome back to Revenge House USA, the home where every scar tells a story, and every story reminds us that pain can turn into power. Go ahead, pour yourself a warm cup of coffee or hot tea, because tonight, we're not just listening to a story, we're living it together. Here, you're not just a viewer, you're part of the Revenge House USA family. A family that feels every heartbreak, every betrayal, and every wild, breathtaking comeback that follows. Tonight's story begins on what was supposed to be a peaceful Christmas Eve, until a mother looked across the dinner table and said, "After the holidays, you need to move out." It wasn't just a sentence, it was a knife wrapped in calm. But from that cut, she rose stronger, turning silence into strength and betrayal into justice. So get comfortable, take a sip of that warm drink, and let us take you on a journey that will break your heart, only to heal it again, one twist at a time. If your own family ever turned their back on you, would you forgive them? Or make them remember who you became without them? Welcome home to the Revenge House USA family. Don't blink, every episode has a twist crazier than the last. Subscribe now so you won't be left behind. The snow outside my mother's house in Ohio looked like powdered sugar falling from heaven. Inside, the air was heavy with cinnamon, cloves, and the sweet glaze of the ham I'd spent all day preparing. It was supposed to be a peaceful Christmas, our first one together since I moved back home to help out. I smoothed the gray table runner across the dining table, set down the candles, and tried to ignore how empty my chest felt. For a moment, I let myself believe the lights, the laughter, the smell of nutmeg meant something real. Mom Elaine Hartman sat at the head of the table like a queen surveying her kingdom. My sister, Brooke, was half buried in her phone, scrolling through social media with the glow of someone living in another world. Aunt Denise adjusted her glasses, pretending not to notice the tension floating between us. I carried the honey-glazed ham from the oven to the table. The glaze shimmered. The meat steamed, it looked like the cover of a lifestyle magazine. I carved slices for everyone, careful, deliberate, pretending this was a normal family dinner. "Looks delicious," Aunt Denise murmured. I smiled faintly, "Thank you." Then, without warning, Mom's voice cut through the room like the carving knife in my hand. "Riley," she said casually, "after Christmas, you'll need to move out." The words didn't crash. They dropped small, cold, and final. I blinked. "What?" Brooke's thumb stopped for half a second, then continued scrolling. Aunt Denise froze mid-bite. Mom dabbed her mouth with a napkin she hadn't used. "You've been wonderful," she continued, "but it's time for you to find your own place again." For a moment, the ticking clock sounded like a hammer in my skull. I stared at the table, the plates, the ham I'd bought with money from my second job. My voice was calm, too calm. "I pay the mortgage, the bills, the groceries. If I move out, what happens to the house?" Mom didn't even look up. "We'll manage," she said lightly. "We?" I almost laughed. That single word cracked something inside me. For 11 months, I had been the we. I'd given up my apartment downtown to rescue her from foreclosure. I'd replaced the furnace, paid the internet, fixed the roof leak, bought the groceries. I had been the invisible engine behind her peaceful life. And now she was evicting me from the very house I'd saved. Aunt Denise cleared her throat softly. "Elaine just wants some space. Maybe it's a good time for everyone to reset." No. Her words felt rehearsed, the kind people say to avoid drowning in someone else's discomfort. I looked back at Mom. She smiled, that practiced, polite smile she wore whenever she wanted to appear grateful in front of others. "Don't make this dramatic, Riley," she added, cutting another piece of ham. "It's Christmas." That was the moment my chest went silent. Not broken, emptied. I put my fork down slowly. "Sure," I said. "If that's what you want." Her silence was an answer. The kind that doesn't need to be explained because it's been decided long before you walked into the room. That night, the snow outside grew heavier, thick, and suffocating. Inside, I stood in my childhood bedroom, the same pale blue walls, the same floral wallpaper, the same quiet ache of being unwanted. Every corner of that room was a ghost of who I'd been, the girl who thought family meant safety. Now, the same walls felt like a cage I'd built myself. My suitcase was under the bed. I pulled it out. The zipper rasped open. An ugly, satisfying sound. I began packing. Laptop, work clothes, sweaters, toothbrush, the essentials. Nothing sentimental. Not this time. As I folded each piece of clothing, the weight of 11 months pressed down on me, every electric bill, every grocery run, every moment I told myself, this is what a good daughter does. No. But good daughters don't last long in bad homes. My hands shook once, just once, before the numbness returned. I booked a room at an extended stay motel on the other side of town. 1 week. Paid in full. That was my escape plan. I waited until the house was asleep. Midnight came quietly. The TV in the living room hummed. Mom's laughter echoing faintly. She was probably on the phone, telling someone another story about her selfless daughter. Yes, I stood by my window, watching the snow fall. The yard lights painted it gold. It looked beautiful from the outside, like everything in this family. Then I moved. I lifted my suitcase, crept into the hallway, careful not to let the floorboards creak. The Christmas tree glowed faintly in the dark, ornaments spinning in the draft. Underneath were the gifts I'd bought for them: a new sweater for Mom, a perfume bottle for Aunt Denise, a makeup kit for Brooke. I left them there. They could keep their gifts. I was taking my dignity. When I reached the door, I hesitated, not from fear, but from disbelief. How easily love can be rewritten as obligation. How easily a mother can unmake her child. I unlocked the door. The sound was sharp, final. The cold air bit my face, sharp as freedom. Snowflakes landed on my hair, melting into tiny tears that didn't belong to sadness anymore. I dragged my suitcase through the snow, my footsteps erasing themselves behind me. I got into my old sedan, started the engine, and stared at the house one last time. Through the window, the Christmas lights flickered softly, red, green, gold, a perfect postcard of a family that never existed. I whispered to the steering wheel, "You wanted me gone?" Done. Then I drove. Past the sleeping houses, past the diner that used to know my coffee order, past the ghosts of a girl who tried too hard. The snow thickened, the road opened, and for the first time in years, the silence felt like peace. The night I left, the snow followed me. It drifted across the highway like pale ghosts chasing my taillights. By morning, the world outside my motel window was buried in white silence, a blank page. But peace never lasts long when your past still has your phone number. The memory of how it all started haunted me like a looping voicemail I couldn't delete. 1 year earlier, I'd been living the kind of quiet life I'd worked years to build. My own apartment downtown, small but sunlit. A coffee shop below my building, where the barista knew my name. A steady job in IT where I could afford rent, food, and the occasional weekend escape. Back then, my world was mine, every bill, every plant, every late-night movie marathon, until the phone rang one Wednesday afternoon. It was Mom. She never called during work hours. Her voice shook before she even said my name. "Riley, they're going to take the house." At first, I thought she was exaggerating. My mother had always been dramatic, a master at making storms out of drizzle. But the sound of her crying wasn't the usual guilt-trip sob. It was raw, panicked, real. "The bank. They sent a final notice," she gasped. "I don't know what to do." My stomach sank. I remembered the house on Willow Street, the creaky stairs, the doorframe where Brooke and I had measured our heights with pencil marks, the faint smell of Dad's aftershave still lingering in the hall closet even 10 years after he passed. The idea of losing it felt like losing him again. I didn't even hesitate. "I'll help, Mom, don't worry, we'll figure it out." A week later, I sat at that same kitchen table, the one that would eventually host my eviction, sorting through stacks of overdue bills, red stamps everywhere, final notice, past due, foreclosure warning. Mom sat across from me, wringing her hands, whispering that she never thought it would come to this. The numbers were brutal. 3 months behind on the mortgage, utilities overdue, credit cards maxed out. She'd been out of work for 6 months, surviving on temporary loans from friends, the kind that were never going to be repaid. The only solution was unthinkable but simple. "I'll move back in," I said quietly. "I'll cover everything until you get back on your feet." Her eyes widened. "Riley, no, I couldn't let you do that." But when I offered, she didn't argue long. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she grabbed my hands. "You're saving me," she whispered. "You're my hero." That word hero felt like sunlight. It made every sacrifice sound noble. Even as I gave up my independence piece by piece. By February, I'd broken my lease, packed up my apartment, and returned to the creaking house on Willow Street. The first month, I felt proud of myself, responsible, like a good daughter should. I paid off the overdue mortgage, reconnected the electricity, and filled the fridge with groceries. Mom promised she'd start job hunting as soon as she felt stable again. She said it so convincingly that I believed her. In March, I installed a new furnace because the old one was making scary noises. In April, I patched the roof leak after a storm. Every month, I covered the bills: $1,200 for the mortgage, $150 for utilities, $80 for internet, $200 for groceries, $120 for our shared phone plan. The numbers drained from my account faster than I could refill it, but I told myself this was temporary. By summer, temporary had become routine. Mom no longer mentioned job interviews. Her mornings were filled with talk shows and online shopping. Her afternoons were spent catching up with friends at the cafe downtown, always on my dime. When I came home late from work, the sink was full, the lights were on, and the thermostat was set to tropical vacation. I'd ask gently, "Hey, any luck with the job search today?" She'd sigh dramatically. "You don't understand, Riley. No one hires women my age. It's humiliating." I'd nod and say, "You'll find something," because I couldn't stand the look of defeat on her face, the same look she had the day she buried my dad. But slowly, sympathy turned into suffocation. One night in August, she invited her friends over for a small dinner. When I came home from work, the table was already set with my dishes, my food, and my electricity paying for the ambiance. "Oh good, you're home," Mom chirped, wearing a floral apron she hadn't cooked in. "Could you start the pasta?" "They'll be here any minute." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that I was exhausted, that I'd been fixing a company server for 10 hours straight, that I couldn't keep being the family provider and the unpaid chef. But her friends arrived, their laughter filling the house like perfume I couldn't breathe through. So I smiled, cooked, and cleaned, while Mom accepted compliments for her lovely dinner. That night, as I scrubbed the last wine glass, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. Tired eyes, chapped hands, and a smile that looked rehearsed. This wasn't help anymore. It was servitude wrapped in guilt. By fall, even Brooke joined the chorus of denial. "Mom's just having a hard time," she'd say when I tried to talk. "You need to be more patient." Patient. As if patience could refill a bank account or repair a soul. Every month, I told myself, just a little longer. But every day, I felt my freedom shrinking. I was living in a house filled with people who only remembered my existence when the Wi-Fi lagged or the fridge was empty. The first time Mom blamed me for the slow internet, I thought it was a joke. "The Wi-Fi never used to do this before you moved in," she snapped. I explained how bandwidth worked. She waved her hand. "Don't give me that tech jargon. I just want my shows to play." The next day, I upgraded the internet plan $30 more per month. When she noticed, she just said, "Well, it's about time." No. That was the moment something inside me began to erode the illusion that love and obligation were the same thing. By December, my savings were thin, my hope thinner. Still, I stayed. Because I believed that one day, Mom would look at me and remember that I was her daughter, not her lifeline. But that Christmas night proved me wrong. When she said, "You need to move out," she wasn't just kicking me out of a house. She was confirming what I had been too afraid to admit. That love, in this home, had an expiration date. And I was the one who'd already paid it in full. The days after Christmas felt like living inside an echo. Every sound, every silence carried the weight of something unsaid. At the motel, the heater buzzed like an old bee, struggling to fill the empty room with warmth. but no amount of heat could thaw what had frozen inside me that night on Willow Street. I kept replaying the past year like a crime scene, looking for the moment everything shifted when gratitude turned into resentment, when "thank you" disappeared and "you owe me" took its place. It hadn't happened overnight. It began with little things, requests so small they felt harmless. "Riley, could you pick up that face cream I like? It's not expensive and you make good money." Then came the dinners, the dinner parties, the guests she'd invite over like she still lived in her prime, wearing pearls I'd bought for her birthday, using dishes I'd scrubbed after midnight. Every event was the same. Her friends would walk in, compliment the decor, and she'd smile sweetly. "Oh, Riley helped a little," she'd say. Helped? I'd paid for the tablecloth, the roast, the champagne, the entire illusion. I told myself it was fine. She'd been through enough. She lost her husband, her job, her pride. This was my way of giving back. But giving back has a limit, and I didn't realize I'd crossed it until there was nothing left of me to give. By summer, the air inside that house grew thick, not from heat, but tension. Mom's tone changed. The gratitude drained away, replaced by irritation that I couldn't quite understand. If the coffee was too strong, she'd sigh dramatically. "You always buy the wrong kind." If I came home late, she'd mutter under her breath. "Must be nice, having time for yourself." Every word was dipped in quiet venom. When I tried to talk about bills, she'd wave me off with a lazy flick of her wrist. "You worry too much. Relax for once." But she didn't mean relax. She meant shut up and keep paying. The breaking point didn't arrive with a scream, it crept in on an ordinary evening in October. I was working remotely, trying to fix a server outage for my company. The call was urgent, my headset on, eyes glued to my laptop screen. Then came the first shout. "Riley." I didn't hear her clearly, so I stayed focused. The outage was costing my department thousands per hour. The second shout was sharper. "Riley, what are you doing in there?" I muted the call and stepped out of my room. Mom sat on the couch, the TV screen frozen mid-scene. "The internet's down again," she snapped. I was watching my show and it started buffering. "It's temporary," I said calmly. "The signal slows down at night." "I'm on a work call." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't give me your tech excuses. Ever since you moved in with all your gadgets, it's been a mess. You're using it all up." I stood there, speechless. "That's not how Wi-Fi works, Mom." She slammed the remote onto the coffee table. "Don't talk to me like I'm stupid." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her that without me, she wouldn't even have Wi-Fi or electricity or food or a home. But something inside me stopped. Because I suddenly understood. It wouldn't matter. The truth didn't fit her narrative. In her world, I was the problem. That night, I upgraded our internet plan to the most expensive tier, an extra $30 every month. When I told her, she just said, "Well, it's about time." No thank you, no acknowledgement. Just another unspoken expectation checked off her invisible list. From that moment, her resentment became constant. If the dishwasher beeped, it was my fault for not unloading it. If the electric bill was high, I was wasting power. If she was in a bad mood, I was being distant. It didn't matter what I did in her eyes. I was the reason everything went wrong. I'd come home after a 10-hour shift and hear her sigh as I hung my coat. "Oh good, you're here. The trash is full." My back's been acting up. But her back never hurt when she went shopping with her friends. Every sigh, every complaint, every fabricated inconvenience carved a little more space between us, a canyon I could no longer bridge. One night, during my on-call week, my phone buzzed with an emergency alert from work. A major client's system had crashed. I answered immediately, speaking quietly, trying not to disturb anyone. For an hour, I guided my team through the reboot sequence. When I hung up and opened my door, Mom was waiting in the hallway, arms crossed, fury glowing in her eyes. "Do you have any idea how disrespectful you are?" I blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I was trying to sleep, and all I could hear was you talking and talking. You have no consideration for anyone else in this house." "Mom, that was a work emergency. I can't just ignore it." Her lips thinned. You think money gives you the right to treat this house like an office? This is my home, Riley. My roof. You live here because I let you. I froze. My jaw tightened. Her roof? The same roof I paid to repair? Something inside me snapped, not with anger, but realization. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was her scapegoat. That night, I sat on my bed, the same room I'd grown up in, surrounded by faded wallpaper and ghosts of a family that used to exist. I wanted to scream, to pack my bags and leave her to face the mountain of bills I'd been shielding her from, but I didn't, because some part of me, the daughter still desperate for approval, whispered, maybe tomorrow she'll be different. But tomorrow never came. In the following weeks, the resentment turned to open hostility. Her friends stopped greeting me warmly. Her tone in public became icy. Brooke visited from college, and when I tried to confide in her, she said softly, "She's just stressed. Try not to upset her. Try not to upset her." The phrase burned through me. I was the one paying the bills. I was the one sacrificing my future. Yet I was the one told to keep the peace. That's when I understood this wasn't a family anymore. It was a hierarchy, and I was its foundation. A foundation everyone was comfortable standing on, until the moment it cracked. By the time Christmas came around, the resentment had fermented into something poisonous. Every look, every sigh, every cold shoulder had been leading to that night, the moment she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You need to move out." And as I sat alone in that motel room, I realized that dinner wasn't an explosion. It was the quiet collapse of a system I had been holding together by myself. She hadn't betrayed me suddenly. She'd been betraying me all year, one favor, one bill, one sigh at a time. The night after my mother's words, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, I'd already burned through anger months ago. It was because I finally felt something sharper, colder, and more final than rage: clarity. I sat on the edge of my childhood bed, the one with the creaky wooden frame and faded floral sheets, and stared at the door. Beyond that thin slab of wood was the same house I'd kept alive for nearly a year. The same house that had just exhaled me like a bad memory. It's strange how quiet betrayal sounds when it's been years in the making. There was no shouting, no fight, no slammed doors. Just one sentence over Christmas dinner. "You need to move out." And in that silence afterward, I heard the truth louder than any scream I had already been erased long before she said it. The house was asleep. Through the thin walls, I could hear the faint rhythm of my mother's snores and the low hum of the furnace, the one I paid for. My eyes swept across the room, tracing every memory I'd left hanging there. The bookshelf from college, the corkboard covered in old photos, a worn-out teddy bear missing an ear. I should have cried. But I was past tears. The grief had calcified into resolve. I reached under the bed and pulled out my old navy blue suitcase. The zipper rasped like a secret being told. One last time, I packed my life. Laptop. Chargers. A week's worth of clothes. My passport. A folder of documents, proof that I wasn't crazy, that I had paid for everything, down to the trash bags she never touched. Then I stopped at my dresser. My reflection stared back, pale and tired. For a second, I saw her the woman I used to be, generous, hopeful, loyal to a fault. Then I blinked, and she was gone. The woman looking back at me now was someone new. Someone dangerous. Someone done. Every sound felt amplified in the quiet. The zipper. The floorboard under my heel. Even the whisper of the wind against the window pane. It wasn't fear that made me move slowly, it was respect. Respect for the moment I was reclaiming. I packed deliberately. I didn't rush. Because this wasn't an escape born of panic. It was an exodus born of power. By midnight, my bag was zipped, my coat was on, and my heart had gone eerily still. I sat for one last minute on the bed, staring at the empty walls. I thought of everything I'd given up: my apartment, my savings, my peace of mind, just to be told I was in the way. No more. I stood, took one deep breath, and turned off the lamp. The darkness felt good. Honest. The hallway smelled faintly of pine from the Christmas tree downstairs. The glow from the living room flickered faintly through the doorway, red, green, gold wrapping the walls in a soft, deceitful warmth. At the foot of the tree sat the gifts I'd bought for everyone. A new sweater for Mom, a fancy candle for Aunt Denise, a $50 makeup card for Brooke. I stared at them. They looked perfect, wrapped in gold paper, tied with red ribbons. I almost laughed. Everything I'd done for them had looked perfect too. But under the wrapping paper, there had always been debt. I left the gifts where they were. I wanted them to see them in the morning, a shrine to everything they took for granted. When I reached the front door, I paused. My hand hovered over the lock. I didn't want to leave with a bang. I wanted to leave the way they treated me, quietly. Like I didn't matter. I turned the knob gently, opened the door, and stepped into the freezing air. The cold bit through my coat, but it felt like justice. Snow crunched beneath my boots, fresh, untouched, pure. I dragged my suitcase down the porch steps, each one sounding like punctuation to a goodbye I would never say aloud. When I looked back, the house glowed softly through the falling snow. From the outside, it looked peaceful, cozy even. The kind of place neighbors drive by and think, what a perfect family must live there. But I knew better. It wasn't a home. It was a stage. And I'd finally walked off it. The drive to the motel was a blur of snowflakes and streetlights. I didn't cry. I didn't think. I just drove. When I pulled into the parking lot, the neon sign flickered, vacancy, like it was winking at me. The man at the front desk didn't ask questions. He slid me a key card without looking up, and I slid him my credit card without hesitation. Room 207. A single bed. Beige walls. The faint smell of bleach and loneliness. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I dropped my suitcase beside the bed, sank down, and exhaled for the first time in months. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of relief. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the faint cracks that looked like rivers on a map. I thought about how my mother would wake up tomorrow and see the empty room. How she'd tell herself I'd overreacted. That I was too sensitive. That she was the victim. Let her. Because for the first time, I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need her to change. All I needed was distance. Distance between who I was and who I was about to become. In that tiny motel room, I made a silent promise. I would never again apologize for outgrowing the people who refused to grow with me. Tomorrow, I would wake up, find a new apartment, rebuild my life brick by brick. But tonight, I would rest. Because sometimes, survival doesn't sound like screaming, it sounds like the click of a door closing behind you, the hum of a heater turning on, the heartbeat of a woman who finally stopped begging to be loved. I closed my eyes and whispered into the quiet, "You wanted me gone. Now watch what I build without you." Outside, the wind howled not in mourning, but in applause. The motel's heater hummed like a tired lullaby, but the silence it filled was heavier than sleep. I woke up on that first morning expecting chaos, phone calls, texts, accusations, begging. Something. Anything. But there was nothing. No missed calls from Mom. No texts from Brooke. No, "Where are you?" or "Come home." Just silence. And that silence hit harder than all her words ever did. At first, I told myself she just needed time. Maybe she was embarrassed, or pretending not to care. But as the hours turned into days, I realized the truth. She wasn't pretending. She didn't care. On the second day, I sat in the corner coffee shop near the motel, laptop open, trying to focus on work. I fixed bugs, joined virtual meetings, pretended to be fine. But between code lines, I kept checking my phone. Nothing. The snow outside had melted into slush. The world moved on. And somehow my mother, the woman I had sacrificed everything for, didn't even notice I was gone. Or worse, she noticed and decided that was exactly what she wanted. On day 3, the silence began to feel weaponized. It wasn't peace anymore. It was punishment. I wasn't being ignored. I was being erased. That evening, as I scrolled through social media, a notification popped up. A tag from my cousin, Olivia. The caption under the photo froze my blood. "Family always finds a way through tough times. Love you, Aunt Elena Chur." In the picture, my mom was smiling, sitting at her favorite cafe, surrounded by friends and relatives. Her eyes were red, the perfect touch for her performance. I clicked into the comments, dozens of them. "You're such a strong woman, Elaine. So sorry about what Riley did to you. Stay strong, Mama." My jaw locked. What Riley did to you? My heart pounded as I texted my sister. "Me? What's Mom telling people?" "Brooke, you won't believe it." There was a pause, 3 flashing dots that felt like thunder. "Brooke, she's saying you screamed at her during dinner, that you threw your plate on the floor, said you hated her and stormed out." I dropped my phone. The room tilted. That wasn't just a lie. That was a character assassination. "She said I what?" I whispered aloud. "Brooke. She told everyone you abandoned her, Riley. That she has no idea where you are. She's been crying to Grandma saying you left her with all the bills." I laughed a sharp, humorless sound. The kind of laugh that breaks instead of heals. "She's playing the victim," I said to no one. Of course she is. Because that was her greatest skill, turning her sins into sympathy, turning my silence into proof of guilt. By the next morning, her lie had spread like wildfire. My Aunt Lisa called. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. Riley." She corrected herself quickly, her voice dripping with fake compassion. "I've been trying to reach you. Your mother is beside herself. How could you do that to her?" "Do what, exactly?" I asked flatly. "She told me you screamed at her on Christmas of all days, threw a fit and walked out. She's heartbroken." My jaw clenched. "That's not what happened." "Oh, so your mother's lying now?" she snapped. "She raised you alone after your father passed. You should be grateful, not cruel." Duh. I wanted to list the mortgage payments, the receipts, the thousands of dollars I had poured into that house. I wanted to show her bank statements, proof, logic, everything. But logic means nothing to people addicted to drama. "You need to call your mother," Aunt Lisa continued. "You broke her heart. Fix it." And just like that, she hung up. I sat there for a long time, gripping my phone, hearing those words over and over. Fix it. I'd been fixing everything my whole life, her finances, her mood swings, her mistakes. Now, they wanted me to fix the lie she created. That was the moment I realized. She didn't just kick me out of her house, she kicked me out of her story. And she replaced me with a villain. The following days were a blur of digital betrayal. My grandmother left a voicemail sobbing, saying she prayed for me to find forgiveness. Lie. My cousin Caleb texted, "What's wrong with you? Your mom is devastated." Every message was another nail sealing the coffin of my reputation. I scrolled through their posts, their pitying comments, and felt my stomach twist. Every time I tried to defend myself, I stopped. Because I knew how it would sound. She's angry. She's unstable. She's trying to justify herself. My mother had written the script, and everyone else was acting it out perfectly. By the 5th day, I couldn't take it anymore. The quiet room, the beeping phone, the lies spreading faster than truth, it was all too much. I opened my laptop, logged into my social media account, and stared at the blank "Create Post" box. My hands trembled, hovering over the keyboard. I could destroy her story in one paragraph. Not with rage, not with curses, but with facts. I could expose her not by fighting dirty, but by staying clean. The thought felt dangerous, but liberating. I took a deep breath and began to type. "To my family and friends, I want to clear up some confusion. For nearly a year, I lived with my mother to help her after she lost her job. During that time, I paid for everything: the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and more. On Christmas, during dinner, she told me I needed to move out. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I simply left quietly. I'm safe, and I'm focusing on rebuilding. That's the truth. Short, calm, unshakable. No emotion, no accusation, just receipts dressed as words. I read it twice, 3 times, and then, with a deep breath, clicked post. For a moment, I stared at the screen. My reflection glowed in the glass, steady, composed, certain. The silence I'd been buried under wasn't silence anymore. It was about to become my megaphone. The post went live at 11:47 p.m. I sat there staring at the glowing screen, my hands trembling slightly, the words blurring together. After a full year of being silenced, manipulated, and erased, my truth was finally out in the open. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. I felt dangerous. I turned off my phone, brewed a weak cup of motel coffee, and sat by the window, watching the snowfall smear the parking lot lights. I whispered to myself, let her talk. Now I'll talk back without saying a single word. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was vibrating violently on the nightstand, a storm of notifications. Messages, mentions, friend requests, unread DMs. My heart pounded. I unlocked the screen. The post had exploded. Hundreds of reactions, dozens of comments. My private messages flooded with a chaos I hadn't expected. The first one I opened was from my cousin Caleb, the same one who'd texted, "What's wrong with you?" 3 days earlier. Caleb. Riley, I'm so sorry. I read your post. I knew something felt off. Mom and I suspected things weren't right but didn't want to interfere. You didn't deserve what she did. I'm here if you need anything. The words felt like oxygen after months underwater. Someone believed me. The next message was from Aunt Lisa, the same woman who had scolded me for breaking Mom's heart. Aunt Lisa. Riley dear, I saw what you wrote. I feel awful for how I spoke to you. Your mother told us a very different story. I should have called you first. Please forgive me. I hope you're doing okay. I read it twice. Then I laughed softly. Not bitterly, almost sadly. Funny how fast people switch sides when the truth finally has a microphone. I scrolled through the comments. Some of Mom's friends wrote predictable things. You shouldn't air family issues online. There are 2 sides to every story. 9. But they were drowned out by others, cousins, old classmates, coworkers, people who knew me. Riley has always been responsible. I remember when she worked 2 jobs to support her family. Good for you for speaking the truth. And then came the comment that undid me completely. It was from my dad's sister, Aunt Mary, the one who had always kept her distance from my mother's drama. Aunt Mary. Riley, your father would be proud of the woman you've become. You did right by your mom, and you're doing right by yourself now. Don't look back. My throat tightened. I hadn't cried since the night I left. But that message cracked something open. Because in those few words, I felt what I'd been craving all along: validation without conditions. But the peace didn't last. Because by noon, Brooke's name flashed across my screen. Brooke. Mom saw your post. She's freaking out. She's calling everyone, saying you're trying to destroy her. Why did you have to do that, Riley? You just made things worse. I stared at her message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't post it to hurt her. I posted it to stop her from hurting me. There was no reply, just silence. Again, I imagined the scene back at the house. Mom pacing in the living room, phone in hand, playing the victim louder than ever, crying to anyone who would listen that her ungrateful daughter had gone public. But what she didn't realize was that her audience was changing. The family who once pitied her was now asking questions. The narrative she'd built on my silence was starting to crumble, brick by brick, under the weight of receipts and calm truth. For the first time, she wasn't in control of the story. I was. That night, I opened my laptop again. My post had tripled in engagement. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out privately, some apologizing, others confessing they'd always known something was off. Every message was a quiet victory, not revenge through cruelty, but through clarity. Still, I couldn't help picturing Mom sitting at the same dining table where she'd told me to leave, now scrolling through her phone, watching her kingdom of sympathy collapse in real time. For years, she'd painted herself as the savior. Now, the mirror was finally showing her reflection, and she couldn't stand it. A few days later, I got a call from Aunt Mary. Her voice was calm, steady, like a lifeline. Riley, I'm proud of you. You didn't stoop to her level. You told the truth and let people see for themselves. That's strength. I swallowed hard. It doesn't feel like strength. It just feels heavy. That's because the truth always is, she said softly, but heavy things make you strong. Then she paused. By the way, I have an empty apartment above my shop. It's small, but it's yours if you want it. I couldn't speak for a moment. Then I whispered, thank you. Los. Because that was the first time in years someone offered me a home, not a house to save, not a debt to pay, but a place to belong. That weekend, I packed again, but this time it wasn't running away. It was moving forward. Aunt Mary helped me move my few boxes into the tiny studio above her antique store. It smelled like old books and lemon oil, a smell that, for the first time, meant freedom. I bought my own groceries, made my own coffee, paid my own bills gladly. Every small act felt like reclaiming a piece of myself my mother had stolen. And though I tried not to check, I occasionally heard whispers from the family grapevine. Mom was unraveling. The bills were piling up again. The lies weren't holding anymore. Aunt Lisa refused to send her money. Brooke was spending more time at school just to stay away. The empire of guilt had finally collapsed. One night, sitting by my window, I thought about that Christmas dinner, how her words had sliced me open, how her silence afterward had buried me alive. And yet, here I was alive, unbroken, rebuilding. My revenge hadn't been fire or fury. It had been truth, patience, and peace. Because nothing terrifies a manipulator more than being ignored while the truth thrives without them. I smiled, took a sip of my coffee, and whispered into the night. This time, the silence belongs to me. Rain hammered the streets that night like it was washing away everything I'd left behind. I had just come home from work, changed into an oversized sweatshirt, and was heating soup on the stove of my new apartment when someone knocked at the door. It wasn't a gentle knock, it was hesitant, uneven, like guilt had found a rhythm. I froze. No one ever visited me unannounced. Aunt Mary always texted first. My coworkers didn't even know where I lived. The rain blurred the world outside my window, but something deep inside me already knew who it was. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. There she was. My mother. Elaine Hartman, the same woman who told me to move out over Christmas dinner. The same woman who had turned the family against me now stood drenched under the hallway light, holding a grocery store apple pie in a plastic container. Her hair was damp, mascara smudged, her smile trembling like a fragile mask. "Riley," she said softly when I opened the door halfway, her voice syrupy sweet, rehearsed. "I had a feeling this was your building. I thought I'd stop by. Maybe we could talk." She held up the pie like it was a peace treaty. I brought dessert. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My stomach twisted. That pie, that fake, store-bought symbol of apology, said everything about her. Cheap. Easy. Convenient. A gesture. Without weight. I leaned on the doorframe, keeping my body between her and my apartment. "What do you want, Mom?" She blinked rapidly, caught off guard by my tone. "Well, aren't you going to invite me in? It's raining." I glanced over her shoulder at the downpour. "You'll be fine." Her eyes widened, the first crack in her confidence showing. "Riley, come on. Don't be cruel. I just wanted to talk. That's all." The way she said cruel made my chest burn. That word, the one she used every time I dared to draw a boundary, was how she kept control. But not this time. I stepped out into the hallway and closed the door gently behind me, leaving my sanctuary untouched by her presence. "You can talk here." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the rain tapping against the windows and her nervous breathing. She shifted her weight. "I just wanted to clear the air," she began. "All those things you said online, they really hurt me." I almost laughed. "You mean the truth?" Her expression hardened. "You made me look like a monster. You didn't need my help for that," I said quietly. Her jaw tightened, and for a split second the mask slipped. I saw it, the same cold, calculating glare from the Christmas table, but then she smoothed it out, replaced it with a trembling lip. "We both made mistakes," she said softly. "You said things, I said things. Let's not dwell on the past." There it was, the classic revision. No accountability, no apology, just rewriting the narrative until we both looked guilty. The manipulation was so familiar it almost felt nostalgic. I crossed my arms. "What do you actually want, Mom?" She hesitated. I thought maybe you could come home for dinner. We could start over. Brooke misses you. The bills are piling up again." And there it was, the real reason. Not love, not remorse. Need. The rain beat harder against the glass. As if the storm itself was shouting the truth she refused to speak aloud. I took a step closer, my voice low but steady. Do you know what's worse than being hated, Mom? She frowned. What? Buying used. Her mouth opened, but I didn't let her speak. You didn't call because you missed me, I continued. You called because your safety net's gone. You lied about me. You turned the family against me. And now that your lies are catching up to you, you need me to fix it. Again. Her lip trembled. That's not true. It is, I interrupted. You don't want forgiveness. You want control. But that version of me, the one who believed every guilt trip, every tear, she's gone. Her eyes flashed with something like fear. You don't mean that. I do. The hallway went silent. For the first time, she didn't have a script. Her words tangled and fell apart in the air between us. She stood there, soaked and speechless, clutching that pie like it could rewrite history. Riley, she said finally, her voice shaking, you're my daughter. And you're my lesson, I said. She blinked, stunned. I reached behind me, opened my apartment door just a crack, and looked her straight in the eyes. You taught me what love isn't, what family shouldn't be, and I'm done repeating the lesson. Then, without raising my voice, without slamming anything, I closed the door soft, final, absolute. Through the peephole, I watched her stand there for a few seconds, expression shifting from disbelief to fury. Then she set the pie down on the floor, an offering to a god who had already stopped listening, and walked away into the rain. I leaned against the door, heart pounding, but not from fear, from freedom. For the first time, the silence wasn't her weapon. It was mine. Inside my apartment, the air felt cleaner. The soft hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the smell of lemon soap, they all whispered the same thing. You're safe now. I glanced down at the pie through the peephole. It sat alone in the hallway, a soggy symbol of manipulation that no longer worked. I didn't open the door to take it. I didn't need closure that came wrapped in sugar. Instead, I walked to my window, watched the rain glisten on the street below, and felt something new rise in my chest. Peace. Not revenge. But peace was my revenge. Because there is nothing more terrifying to a manipulator than realizing they no longer matter to the person they once controlled. The morning after the rain, sunlight poured through my window like forgiveness. The world outside had been washed clean, rooftops shining, puddles reflecting the pale winter sky. I stood barefoot in my small kitchen, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy. It felt mine. I took a slow sip and smiled at the silence. Not the suffocating silence of guilt or manipulation, but the healing kind, the one that hums between heartbeats when your soul finally stops bracing for war. In the weeks after my mother's visit, everything inside me began to rearrange. Not dramatically, quietly. I deleted her number, not out of anger, but because I didn't need the reminder anymore. I unpacked the last of my boxes in Aunt Mary's apartment above the antique store. Each item I placed: a book, a mug, a photograph, felt like a declaration. This is who I am now. The world didn't magically become easier. My workload was still heavy. My savings still recovering. But without the constant emotional taxation, life felt lighter. I woke up early to jog by the river. I bought myself flowers. I painted the walls soft cream instead of the sterile white they came with. And every morning, I brewed my coffee just the way I liked it, strong, with cinnamon. The kind my mother always said smelled too sharp. Funny how freedom has a scent. Sometimes, I'd catch myself thinking about her. Not with anger, but with distance, the kind of distance you feel when remembering a dream that used to scare you. I wondered if she still told her stories, if she still played the victim to anyone who would listen. Maybe she did. But this time, her audience was smaller. People had started to see through her act because truth has a long memory. One afternoon, Brooke called. Her voice was timid, unsure. Hey, she said. I just wanted to check in. Mom's been quiet lately. Quiet, that word again. How are you? I asked carefully. I don't know, she admitted. I used to think you were cruel for leaving, but now, I think I get it. I leaned back, the sunlight catching on the edge of my coffee mug. You'll understand fully when you stop apologizing for her feelings. There was a long pause, then a whisper. Maybe one day, I'll be as brave as you. My chest tightened. You already are. You just haven't walked out the door yet. We didn't say goodbye. We didn't need to. Some conversations are bridges, not destinations. By March, I had rebuilt myself piece by piece. I got promoted at work, started saving again, even joined a weekend art class. Every new thing I learned, every brushstroke, every line of code felt like planting flowers in soil that had once been scorched. One Sunday, I drove past Willow Street. I didn't plan to, but some ghosts deserve to be seen one last time before you let them go. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling, the front porch sagging slightly. A for sale sign leaned crooked in the yard, half covered in mud. I pulled over for a moment and just stared. This was the place that broke me, built me, and tried to own me. And now it stood empty, waiting for someone new to fill it with stories. I didn't feel pity or triumph, just peace, because the home I had rebuilt inside myself was unshakable. That night, I sat by my window, a candle flickering beside my coffee mug. The city outside hummed softly, life moving forward, unapologetic, unstoppable. And in that quiet, I realized something. Revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like healing louder than they expected you to. The real victory wasn't proving her wrong. It was living well enough that her opinion no longer mattered. I opened my journal, the one I'd started the night I left, and wrote down a single sentence. Freedom isn't leaving the house. It's leaving the version of yourself who kept knocking on its door. No. I smiled, closed the book, and leaned back. Tomorrow, I would take Aunt Mary to brunch. Maybe visit the bookstore. Maybe buy that lavender dress I'd been eyeing for weeks. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I could. At 11:58 p.m., I received a text from an unknown number. I hope you're happy, Riley. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled, deleted it, and whispered to myself, I am. Vixation. Outside, the moonlight spilled over the rooftops like a promise. I set my coffee mug down, looked at my reflection in the darkened window, calm eyes, soft smile, and realized I finally recognized her. The woman who once lived for approval was gone. The woman who stood here now lived for peace. And that peace? That was the loudest revenge of all. Welcome to Revenge HouseUSA, where betrayal becomes rebirth and silence turns into power. If you ever walked away from someone who made you feel small, what's the first thing you'd do with your freedom?